Hello and welcome to Wednesday Live with Evie, number 38. I am Evie Burke. And if you're not familiar with me, I work with entrepreneurs and I help them take their productivity to a new level. And today we're talking about saying no with confidence. And before I jump into that, I want to share a couple of things with you. One is, if you are not already in my Facebook group, it is Productivity for Women Entrepreneurs. It's a free group and it's a great place to be if you just want a little support on productivity. Let me bring up my notes here. Use the right mouse. Bring up my notes. I can tell you what one of the members of the group had to say about it. She said it's a great place to it's a great and safe place to be honest, help each other, and get better about productivity. So if that sounds like something that would be useful for you, head over there and join us. Also, there is a freebie on my website at oneinsightcloser.com. And that is how to choose priorities when everything is important. Because a lot of times in our businesses, we get so much happening that everything feels like it's really important and it has to happen right now, and we don't always know how to take a step back and evaluate what is it that really needs to be happening next. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, head over there and grab that. And last but not least, I have a mastermind group that has already started, but there's a couple of spaces left. So if you're interested in masterminding or finding out what that is, reach out to me and let me know, and we can have a conversation about that. So let me share this in the event, just so that if anybody is looking at the event is trying to find it, they can find it. Let's see. Let me hit the share button. So what we're going to do today, while I'm doing that, is we're going to be talking about how to confidently say no. And we're going to be doing that in a particular scenario. So I'm guessing, because if you're here, then you have a business, that you have found yourself in a situation where you are having a coffee with somebody and they launch into why their stuff is so great and why you should buy it, and you're trying to figure out how you stop that conversation or get the heck out of there. Or maybe you did a free session with somebody. They offered a free session and you took them up on it because it was super interesting to you. And at the end, you realized that either they're not the right fit, or it's not something you want to work on right now, or whatever the reason is, you're not interested, but you're not sure how to say it, and all of a sudden it's awkward. Or maybe somebody just called you up and said, hey, I have this thing and this is why you should be part of it, and blah, 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 blah. And you're sitting there thinking, how did this happen? How do I get off of this phone call? What happened here? And, the common situation here is you're not interested, and for whatever reason, the other person isn't picking it up, or maybe you haven't told them that you're not interested, so the other person is continuing. So we're going to talk about saying no. We're going to talk about what that means, and you're seeing me look over to the side. I'm looking at my notes. I have a lot of notes on this subject today. We're going to be talking about what that means and how to set yourself up to maybe not be in those situations, but more importantly, if you find yourself in that situation, what to do about it. And we're going to do this through the lens of 4 experiences that I have had over my years in business. So I have been in business since 2011, I believe. So that's 6 or 7 years. And I've done some things right, and I've done some things wrong, and I've had some great experiences, and I've had some not so great experiences. So some of the things to keep in mind as I'm going through these experiences, I'm going to share 4, and we're probably going to actually go to 45 minutes today. So there's a lot of information here. So I'm going to try to keep the stories as short as I can, and forgive me if I share a little bit more than is perhaps needed, but oh, am I not loud? Am I not clear? Let me know. Okay, Ellen says I'm clear. All right, great. So we'll continue. If I'm not clear or I'm popping in and out, then absolutely let me know, because we're early enough in that I can, okay, good, that I can stop if I need be and restart. So anyway, I'm going to share these 4 situations with you. Feel free to jump in with any questions you have about these situations as we go along, and maybe any additional insights that you have. I'd be interested to hear about those. But as I'm going to go through each situation, I'm going to do a debrief of the situation after I share it. And some of the things we're going to be looking at is, how did I react or respond at the situation at the time? So did I contribute to the situation, or did I not contribute to the situation? Like, what was going on? Did I nicely interrupt? Did I let it continue? Did I smile and nod and just hope that they would get the hint that I wasn't interested? Like, what was going on there? Or did I confidently tell them no? So I'll share some stories around where we'll look at those things. And one of the other things to think about is, who was I being in the situations? Was I confident? Was I a doormat? Was I passive? Was I unclear? I'm just adjusting myself in my chair so I can not be so smushed in. But who was I being in this situation? And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how to clearly and articulately say no, some things not to do, and ways to review the situations that you've been in, because a lot of times there's a lot of things to learn from the good and the bad situations we've been in, about what we did right and what we did wrong. So 2 of the stories that I'm going to share are things that I could have done better in, and 2 of them are situations where I did pretty good. If you got my newsletter or you read my blog, then you'll see that I actually was complimented a couple of times in the last couple weeks on my saying no. So I'm going to share those stories with you. So those are the last 2 stories. All right. I don't have water. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump in with the first story. So it probably won't surprise you to know that my first story is from my first few months in business. I had been out networking, and I had met this gentleman who invited me out to lunch, and he said that he was interested to hear about the coaching I was doing and to see how we might work together. And I said, great. And kind of the pit of my stomach, I was like, oh, he's going to try to sell me his product I don't want to be sold to. And I just was not looking forward to it. And one of the things that I did was I told him that the afternoon didn't work so well for me, and could we change it to a meeting for coffee? So I think we met at like 9:30, and I did what I normally did in that situation, which was I got there about a half hour early, and I got myself some coffee, and I sat down and I read before our meeting, because I was so new to networking and I was such a ball of nerves that I would get myself there early so I could calm down and not be a ball of nerves when the coffee meeting started. So you're going to hear me use the term one-on-one probably interchangeably with coffee meeting. That's the terminology that's used in a networking group that I belong to. And I know a number of you that are watching this belong to that networking group, so it's not going to faze you. But for any of you that are watching where you're like, one-on-one, what's a one-on-one? It's another term for a coffee meeting or a get-to-know-you meeting with a fellow business owner. So just be aware that if that pops out of my mouth, that's what's happening. Or that's what that is. So anyway, he comes in for the one-on-one, and he has brought a woman with him, and he tells me that she's being trained in selling the company that he works for. So this was a multi-level marketing company. I'm not going to share the name. And he was training her, so he brought her along to see how these meetings go. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. She seemed nice enough. And I proceeded to listen to him talk about his company and his products for about 2 hours. And I was just thinking a lot of the time, how do I get out of here? And then the other thing was, oh, well, I'll just watch and see how he handles the sales conversation and learn from it. So 2 hours goes by. Finally, we're at the point where I have to say yes or no. Like, there's nothing else to talk about. And I kind of meekly say, no, I'm not interested, and the meeting's over, and I leave. So let's review the situation. So there's a lot to say of how I could have approached this differently, right? I didn't clarify with him right away exactly what I was hoping that the meeting would be, you know, a get to know you, not a get to know your company and your product type meeting. I also was very wishy-washy in the meeting about whether I was interested or not, because I was asking him questions about things, and so that made him think maybe I was interested when I wasn't. I was more curious because my mom had been involved with this company in the 90s, so I just had some questions just because it was kind of interesting to me to see what had changed, but not that I was actually interested in the business opportunity or purchasing the products. So I needed to be clearer. So if we go back to our questions, how did I react or respond to the situation? I wasn't clear. I was very wishy-washy. He was getting mixed signals from me about whether I was interested or not because I was asking questions, but then at the same time just kind of like, oh yeah, that's great. You know, not, or, you know, you're smiling, but your eyes are kind of like, oh, can we please just stop this now? Who was I being in that situation? I was very passive. I was very unclear. I was not confident. And so him being the, I'll say pushy salesperson that he was, he saw that as an opportunity to continue to try to convince me to buy something. And it didn't work, but I wasted 2 hours of his time in addition to 2 hours of my own time. And so I left feeling, oh, this was so frustrating. This was such a waste of time. Blah, 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 blah. And yes, and Ellen, he wasted his time and mine. So yeah, he walked out of there also probably feeling annoyed that I had wasted his time and he didn't get a sale, and he was probably frustrated too. And he didn't, and Ellen, you're right, he didn't push for clarity. He didn't say, is this something you're interested in? It was all, let me do more convincing. So there's a lot to learn there about sales, but if we're looking, that could be too. I could have become a what not to do lesson for the newbie, you never know. There's a lot to look at from the sales perspective, but if we're just looking at the saying no perspective, it's, I wasted his time, we both wasted each other's time there. We both probably left frustrated, and if I could have clearly articulated early on that I was not interested in his business opportunity or his products, then we both would have been a lot happier, right? So story number 2. I did a program, ironically, on sales. It was around sales calls with a coach that the coach I had been working with before that had worked with for a couple of years, and she just loved this guy, loved him to death. And so he had this training on sales coming up. It was like a workshop online, you know, group program type of thing. And so I signed up for it and I did the program and learned his sales conversation, and it's very similar to most sales scripts that you will probably see in the entrepreneurial world. It is to the ones that I've seen. And anyway, that's an aside. And about 2 weeks after the program was over, I received a phone call from one of his associate coaches. And he was offering me a discounted seat to an upcoming event that this person was having. And I knew that I wasn't interested. You know, the timing wasn't right, and I had just gotten a good feel for this coach, and I knew that he wasn't for me. I knew I wouldn't be doing anything else with him. And so I told the associate coach I wasn't interested. And he proceeded to try to coach me around saying yes. And I said no, I wasn't interested, and he started in on the, well, do you think you would learn something if you went to the event? Now, me, I am somebody who tries to learn from any situation I find if I'm at a training, I try to learn something from it, whether I've heard it 10 times or the first time, right? Because you can always hear something new in information that's being presented, even if it's something you've heard before. And so I said, I'm sure I would learn something, but it's not something that I'm interested in. And so, we went back and forth. I probably told him no 3 to 5 times, and he just was continuing to follow the script. He continued to follow the script, and I was kind of amused by it because I could see how he was following the script. But as we went on, I was also kind of getting annoyed because I've told you no like 3 or 4 times now. And so finally what happened was I told him, you know how when there's something that you should say yes to, but it's outside of your comfort zone and it's kind of scary, but it's really important that you say yes to it, and you kind of get the butterflies in your stomach and your back gets all tingly. And I could hear in his voice that when he said yes, that he was excited, that he thought that I was going to, take him up on his offer. And I told him, I don't have that. And he went, oh, okay, well, thank you for your time. And he hung up, and we both went on about our days. It took a good 20 minutes or so for us to get there. So in this case, if we go back and we look at it, I was very clear. I said no multiple times. I said I wasn't interested. And he was following a script. However, I think here there's a couple of things. He wasn't present to what I was saying or how I was saying it. He was following the script that he had that said, this is what you do next, versus listening and really hearing that I was saying the no. Now, for me, even though I was clear, I could have been clearer, because at any point throughout that conversation, I could have said, no, I'm not interested. Thank you for offering. I'm hanging up now. And I could have been done with it. And instead, I stayed on the call with him and maybe wasted a little bit of his time, not as much as the 2-hour conversation. Wasted a few minutes of my time. I was kind of amused and annoyed when I got off the phone. But I just remember thinking it was so interesting to see how you can take a sales script and be so tied to a script that you're not actually present to the conversation that's happening. So, there's a lot of sales lessons to learn in here. But so the other thing to look at here as we're talking about this is think about how you're approaching sales. And again, I'm not going to get deep into that, but there's a lot of lessons in there too. So I was very clear. Who was I being in this situation? I was confident. I was clear. Thank you, Ellen. Ellen says she thinks I handled it well, especially because of the relationship of the coach I had been working with to the head coach, or the main person here. Yeah, so I was very clear. The conversation only lasted 20 minutes, so you could say it went on a whole 20 minutes or only 20 minutes, however you want to look at it. But I think I handled it decently. Yes, there's a couple of different things I could have done to maybe end it a little faster, but I think it went as well as it could have with where I was at the time. I would not have been comfortable with saying I'm hanging up now. And maybe I'm slightly more comfortable with that now. So anyway, moving on to story number 3. So story number 3 is fairly recent. So this is one of the stories where I think both sides handled it really, really well. The sales offer part of it and me saying no. So this is one of them where I was complimented. Ellen says, shocker, I'd politely hang up on anyone. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. So, in this situation, I was having a coffee with somebody that I've known for probably 4 or 5 years through networking. And we get along fine. Side note is she's in the same business as part of the same company as the person in the first story, but she handles sales of her product and enrollment completely differently than the first person does. So we sit down and we have coffee and we're chatting and we're talking about, the things going on in our lives and whatnot. We're just, reconnecting and getting to know each other, the way that you want a getting to know you coffee, a one-on-one to go. And toward the end, we, shift the conversation just a little bit and share what's going on in our business and what's new or what's changed. And she shares, because when I first met her, she wasn't selling or working with this particular company and product range, whatever. And so she asked me if I had heard about the company before and seen the she didn't say sales pitch or the intro video, but if I talked to anybody about the product before or the company. And I said I had, and it had been a couple of years. And she said, okay, well, a lot's changed over the last couple of years with this particular company. Would you be interested in watching a half-hour video if I were to send you a link for that? Now, here's a spot where it would have been super easy for me to say, yeah, sure, send me the video. And then I could have just not watched the video, right? However, this is where both when you're on the receiving end and the one asking, somebody having a clear no is such a gift, because I told her no. I think what I had said was, thank you so much for asking. I'm not interested. And she said, oh, okay, great. And we moved on and we continued the conversation in a different direction. Now, if I would have said yes, it would have been a lot more time and energy on both of our in both cases, because she would have then went home and written me an email and included the link to the video. And I would have gotten the video and went, oh, yeah, I'm not interested in this and I'm not going to watch it. But I should, but I'm not going to, type of thing, right? Lost some time and energy on that. And then in a week or whenever she would follow up with somebody, she would reach out again and say, hey, did you have a chance to see that video? Did you have any questions? Here's the link again if you haven't had a chance to watch it. And then I would get the email again and maybe feel a little guilty and ignore it. I would see her networking and she might ask about it, and then I'd either have to tell her I didn't see it or just feel guilty when I saw her, right? So there's a lot of time and energy, especially a lot of energy around both of us, because I said if I would have said yes to something I wasn't actually interested in and had no intention of looking at. So by me saying no, it saved her all of that time of doing the follow-up work and checking in with me, and it saved me the time and energy of seeing these emails continually popping up in my inbox. So I said no, and she didn't have to do any of that, because I knew this wasn't something I was interested in. That if she were to send me the link, I would never look at it. Now, I will admit, though, when she asked that question, I had a twinge of, I want to be liked by this person, so maybe I should say yes. And it wasn't difficult, but it wasn't like super easy either for me to say, thank you so much for offering, but I'm not interested. There was a little bit of me going, I'm really not interested, and I'm going to tell her that, and I hope it goes okay. And yeah, Ellen, it's true. I was liked because I said no directly. And she appreciated that because it saved her time and energy. She didn't have to go and do a bunch of follow-up with somebody who wasn't interested. So in our day-to-day lives, sometimes it might seem like it's easier to say yes to something to be liked. But in business, especially, it is so important, if you're not interested, just to tell somebody you are not interested, because it saves everybody so much time and energy if you can clearly say no. Okay, so third example. I think it was last week. I had signed up to be part of a 1-hour class that a coach that I follow was offering, and it was going to be a Zoom call. And I just assumed it was going to be, a Zoom webinar where the person is talking and you're listening and taking notes, but it wasn't. It was actually a meeting. And so I had signed on about 5 minutes early, and she was there, and it was just the two of us, so we kind of chatted a little bit. And then the time came for it to start, and she usually waits a couple of minutes to make sure that people get on, but it became apparent that of the dozen or so people that had signed up to participate, that no one else was coming to the call. So she asked me if I would be comfortable with being personally coached through something on this call and that being shared later. And she says, if you're not comfortable with it, that's fine. I can, tweak the way that I'm offering this, that I'm going to do this class. And I said, no, that's fine. Let's do it that way. So Ellen, you say ugh, 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 but there was never any ugh about it. There was always a question. Are you comfortable with this? Would you be willing to do this? And I was never made to feel in any regard like no was going to be a problem. No was always completely a valid answer with this woman. And I really appreciated that about her. I said yes, and I basically got a really great coaching call that I didn't have to pay for, that other people pay, a couple of $100s for, to have, a half hour or an hour of this woman's time, and I basically got it for free. So part of this call, though, was around being clear in what you want and what you don't want. And so toward the end of the call, she did, she mentioned that she would share for the recording, in their email, that they would have some information about next steps that they might want to take. And then she stopped the recording, and she said to me, I'm going to give you an opportunity to say no if it's something you're not interested in, and that's fine. So your first opportunity to say no is, are you interested in learning more about this? And she named the program name that I am starting. And I didn't know anything about the program, so I was genuinely interested in hearing more. And so I said, yes, I would be interested. But again, it was very clear that saying no to that situation was completely fine. That she wasn't going to be upset that I had been on that call and then wasn't interested in the next steps. Like, that wouldn't have been a problem if I would have said no. But I said yes, so she said, okay, great. And so she continued to tell me about the program that was coming up. And it became clear, she was talking about it, that the time commitment was something that I wasn't willing to do. And the money commitment was something that I wasn't really interested in at this time. So when she finished, she said, is this something you're interested in? And I said, you know what? Right now I'm choosing to spend my time and my money in other places. And she said, that's great. That was a really clear no. Thank you for that. And we chatted about just a couple of other things that were coming up, and we got off the phone. And it was very clear. So, again, if you look at the sales conversation, she handled it so masterfully, but at the same time, who I was being in that situation, I was very connected with, and part of it was from the coaching, I was very connected with where I was and what was and wasn't going to work for me right now. And I knew that the offer that she had was something that just wasn't going to work for me right now. So I told her, and it was fine. And there was no, let's try to coach you around this. Yes, Ellen, exactly. She handled me like a human being and not like a salesperson. I loved, that's exactly the perfect way to say it. I was clear in what I wanted and what I didn't want, and she heard that clarity and moved on. So I think a lot of times where if you're in a sales conversation and somebody says no and you want to coach them around it, notice if it's because you want to coach them around that because it is unclear, like they're not clearly saying no, so you're trying to find out more about, what's going on there. Or are they clearly saying no and there's nothing else that needs to be said and you just need to move on, right? And so if you look at the way I handled the last situation, I wasn't tied to, is she going to like me or not? Because I also had the feeling that it didn't matter. I was confident. I was very clear about what I needed and didn't need in that particular situation. And I said no and we moved on, right? And that's what you want, is to be able to say no and for the conversation to conclude however it naturally will conclude. All right, so those are the 4 examples. Let me talk a little bit now about you. So if you are going into a situation, think about, what do you expect from the situation? So if you're having coffee with somebody, be very clear going into it, even... Okay, let me see. Ellen jumped in here. So Ellen asked if she is a bitch or just evolved, because she doesn't think about she doesn't think about how the person receiving the no feels like. I think you just might be a little more evolved, because I'm guessing it's not that you are unaffected by the other person, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you are clearly in the camp of how you react to me saying no is your business, and I am not responsible for that, right? So if you were, a bitch about it, it might be, why are you asking me such a stupid question? No, I'm not interested in your product, right? If you brought in like that attitude about it, yeah. But you just know that how they react to what you're saying is about them and it's not about you. Now, to all of us, that doesn't give us an excuse to be rude. But if you're clear in saying no isn't rude. If somebody thinks you saying no is rude, then that might be something they look at. If you added some stuff that didn't need to be there, then maybe you are being rude, but a no is a complete sentence and it's not rude. Yeah, Ellen, if they don't like you because you said no, then they're probably not going to like you much if you say yes either. Like, yeah, exactly. So, when you're going into these situations for coffee meetings or, sales calls, where you're on the receiving end, whatever it is, just know going in what you want that to look like. So what does a successful meeting look like? What does a successful coffee look like? What are you talking about? What are you not talking about? If you're having a complimentary conversation with a business owner where you're finding out a little bit about how they work with people, how do you expect that to go? What do you expect from it? Are you expecting to work with them? Are you not expecting to work with them? If you're going in just to use a freebie session, just for the freebie session, then maybe you're in that conversation for the wrong reason. But if you're going in because you genuinely want to find out what it is they do and how they help people and if this is a good fit for you, then that's the right reason to be on one of those freebie sessions, right? And if you find out that it's not a good fit, whether it's because you realize that you need something else first or that the things that they're offering just don't jive with where you are right now, tell them no. That's perfect. That's the perfect answer if it's not a good fit for you. Just no, thank you. All right, so also think about who you're being when you walk into the situation. who do you want to be? Who is it that you are, and who do you want to be? Do you want to be confident? Are you somebody who just loves people up? How are you going to, think about, focus on that? Are you somebody who likes to have fun? How are you having fun in that conversation? Bring that fun, just be you and bring that to the conversation. Do you want to be more confident because maybe sometimes you don't always feel confident? Think about what a confident conversation looks like. How are you behaving? How are you acting? What are the things that you're talking about? What are you sharing? And whether you're in the moment or you're reviewing the situation later, notice, how are you reacting or responding to the situation? Are you smiling and nodding yes or no when you're really not interested? Are you clearly saying no? Are you nicely interrupting when they're trying to tell you all about their new product line and you're not interested in the new product line? You're more interested in them as a person and maybe how they found that business or got started in it, but you're not interested in all of their new products. Are you just sharing that with them, that you just would rather find out more about them right now? How are you approaching it? How are you in the moment? And again, as you're going through the situation or as you're reviewing it, who are you being in that situation? Are you being a doormat? Are you being passive? Are you being confident? Are you sharing, whatever is actually going on with you so that you can have that authentic connection with the person across the table, right? So now, saying no, because sometimes it can be really hard for us to say no. Be brief, be honest, say no, and repeat as often as necessary. I actually did one of these lives earlier this year around deciding to say no and actually saying no. It wasn't around specifically, sales conversations or coffee meetings, but I know the information still applies, and I share that. I break down the being brief, being honest, saying no, and repeating. So I'll include a link to that below if that's something that you're interested in learning more about that. Oh, Ellen, yeah, you've been here a while. You say you remember that one. And another thing you can do is just acknowledge the ask and tell them no. So in the case of story number 3, where we were having coffee and she asked if I was interested in watching that 30-minute video, I said, thank you so much for asking, but I'm not interested. And it was just as simple as that. And what was interesting was, she actually paused for a minute and looked at me and she said, that's one of the nicest no's that I've received in a really long time. And she appreciated it. So you can say no and you can be really clear about it. And you can also be kind, and people will appreciate that. So let's see, what else do I want to say here? Okay, the other thing here is sometimes we try to not say no. Don't do that. If you know it's a no, say no, right? And so don't delay, don't deflect, don't defer. So don't say, let me think about it, or ask me again later if you know the answer is no. Don't deflect by saying, oh, have you asked such and such a person? Such and such a person might not appreciate that. So just be very clear, say no, and don't defer. If you say right now is not a good time for me, and you know that it's something that you're just not going to be interested in, just tell them. Because if you say right now is not a good time for me, or I'm not interested in that right now, then they're probably going to follow up with you, which again takes them time and effort that if you're not interested in whatever it is that they're talking about or selling or offering, just let them know. However, if you genuinely do need time to think about it, if you genuinely do think that there's this other person that would be interested, or if you genuinely are interested but now's not the right time, by all means, say any of these things. But if you know the answer is no, just say it, because it'll save everyone time and aggravation and energy if you're just upfront about the fact that it's not a good fit. And it makes it so much easier for everybody. So the last thing I want to share is, so I mentioned that the first story was around that 2-hour conversation because I couldn't say no. I don't have those conversations anymore. I don't have coffees with people where they sit down and they want to show me, you know, the video of the product that they're trying to sell, or the product line details, right? And I think most of it is because I'm sending out a different energy, a different vibe than I was 6 years ago. And so those people aren't seeing me as somebody who's potentially interested in sitting and watching that video. And it also could be that maybe I have sat down with people who are going to do that, and then however the conversation went, they just didn't bring it out, right? So take a look at how you're showing up places. If you're getting a lot of those coffee meetings where people are trying to sell you things, and also realize that sometimes people are doing the best they can, and the best they can just might not be very good. And I don't know another way to say that, but you know, you do the best you can with the information you have, and sometimes you could be doing better, but you don't know that because you just don't know that, right? So be gentle with people, but don't be afraid to say no. So any questions or comments? We're almost at 45 minutes. I'm surprised I haven't gone longer yet. I think my stories, I was able to keep them fairly compact. For any of you that want to, where this really resonated with you and you want to learn more about saying no or how that might look for you, let's have a conversation. We'll have just a 45-minute conversation. I'll do some coaching with you to find out, you know, what maybe some next steps for you will be. And at the end of the conversation, I will give you the opportunity to say no or yes. So just being upfront with you there, it'll give you a real easy way to practice that muscle if that's something that you need to practice. Because sometimes saying no takes, is a muscle that needs to be developed. So let me look at my notes, see if there's anything else here I want to cover. I think I've covered pretty much everything. I'm looking at the end of my notes. It has all of the different titles I was playing with for this one, so it made me giggle. Yeah, that's everything. So if you have any questions about this or want to chat about it, just reach out, let me know, say something in the comments, and we can get something scheduled just to have a conversation about next steps. And if at the end you say no, you're not interested, great. Clear no's are wonderful. So yeah, and Ellen agrees that there's muscle memory. And Sharon, I did see you, so I was on a roll, so I didn't mention it, but I did see your comments, Sharon. So yeah, if you have any questions, I will be around to answer the questions, you know, here and there throughout the rest of the day, and I'll see when anything pops up here that people say in the future. So anyway, until next week, much love. Bye.